Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People Course Preview. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that today's session is being rebroadcast and you are currently in a listen-only mode. Now I'd like to acquaint you with some of the ways you can participate in today's event. There are no live polls or chats in this rebroadcast session. However, we still encourage you to participate by using the Q&A panel on the upper left corner of your screen. For those of you who use Twitter, we encourage you to tweet along with us today using hashtag CMC events. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's event, please submit your issue into the Q&A panel for assistance. As a reminder, a copy of the presentation slides are not available. However, you will receive a follow-up email later this week with instructions on how to view the recording. At this time, I would like to introduce you to Tanya Shervoni, your moderator. Tanya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and welcome everyone. Before we jump into the main content, we want to get a feel for your familiarity with Franklin Covey program. So we'd love to get your feedback on this poll question, which you're going to see open momentarily on the right-hand side of the screen. So the question we want to ask you today is, have you taken a Franklin Covey course? So we've given you 3 options here, yes, no, and then option C, which is no, but you do have courses available at your organization, Franklin Covey courses, even though you may not have taken them yourself. So this is a good practice for the poll questions that we have in the session. So if once you've selected that, as Jessica said, don't forget to hit the submit button at the bottom of the screen. It is out of view, so it can be easy to forget. So we won't get your response unless you click submit, and this information will just help inform the future sessions that we offer around these programs. So with that, hopefully you've had a chance to give us your feedback. We're going to move right into the main section of our presentation. And just a word about CMC. For those who are new to Canadian Management Centre, we are a national organization dedicated to prepare the next generations of leaders to thrive in tomorrow's marketplace. And if you've attended one of our past webinars, I'll just mention that today's session is going to be a bit different than what we normally do. In this hour, you're going to get a powerful introduction to the timeless and ever-relevant 7 Habits of Highly Effective People signature 4.0 version, delivered by one of Franklin Covey's expert facilitators. So we at CMC are incredibly excited to have partnered with Franklin Covey to make their courses available to people like us here in Canada. And I won't say too much more because you're going to get a taste firsthand of why the information and the tools in this program are transformative on both a personal and a professional level. As Jessica mentioned, as you get those insights, feel free to tweet them. Our handle is @CanadianManagement. Without further delay, let's jump right in. I'd love to introduce our facilitator today, Eileen Lan. Eileen is a senior consultant and e-learning strategist who has facilitated literally thousands of programs and has an impressive track record of helping clients create long-term change by applying Franklin Covey's principles and processes. And having gotten to know Eileen a little bit in preparation for today's session, I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're going to love her passionate enthusiasm for today's discussion. Welcome, Eileen, to the session, and I'm going to hand the ball over to you.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and thanks for inviting me to preview the 7 Habits program for you and all of your attendees today. And just in case anyone is wondering about that 4.0 in the title, it's our way at Franklin Covey of just saying that this program is the 4th version of the original 7 Habits program. And in this latest version that we've been offering, we have some new updated materials. But what really makes me excited is that we've also developed resources for participants to use after the program, and a few of them are pictured here. In the very back row, you'll see a little book called 7x7 Contract. That's 7 habits in 7 weeks, and it's enabling you to actually apply what you learned to your action plan and live that. And in the front row, you see several things like the talking stick, the skill cards, the practice cards. You'll use some of them in class, but they're really designed to help you reinforce after the program. And we even have a phone app now. That makes me really excited. So you can even get reminders and use your phone to help apply what you're learning. Well, our goal at Franklin Covey is to not have people say, yes, I took the 7 habits. We want them to say, yes, I'm living the 7 habits. So that's really what this is all about. Now, in the time that we have together, I think what I'm going to do is share 3 things with you. First, I'm going to share some history on the origins of the 7 habits and the meaning of the word effectiveness. We're also going to look at 2 key models from the program's opening module. And then I'm going to let you have a taste of one of the 7 habits so you can get a sense of what really goes on inside the program. And along the way, I'm going to be showing a few of our award-winning program videos. So we're going to get started. The 7 habits, I'm sorry guys, hold on one second, there we go. The 7 Habits program is based on the landmark book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen R. Covey. Now, when that book was first published in 1989, it became an instant bestseller. And since then, it's sold over 25 million copies, mostly through word of mouth. We never advertised the book, and it's been translated into over 40 different languages. Now, what I'd like to do is just pause for a second and let everybody tell me a little bit about their experience with the book. So Jessica's going to put up a poll, and the poll question is pretty simple. What has been your experience? Read some of it, read it recently, read it years ago, read it multiple times, or have plans to read it? So please go ahead and don't forget to click the submit button so we can see what your responses are to the poll. Tanya, what's been your experience with the book, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I don't mind you asking at all. I remember reading the book, and I remember highlighting it vividly, putting all kinds of flags in it, and it having a huge impact on me. It was several years ago, and you know what's interesting, you said at the outset, you don't want people to say that they took the 7 habits, you want them to say they live it. And in retrospect, I wish I had followed up reading the book with taking the course or you know, maybe having a coach or something, because it's something that I do want to revisit, because I think there's opportunities for me to amp up my use of it and put it into action.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Jess, you want to close the poll and see what our responses are? Tanya, while we're waiting for that, my goal is to read it many more times than I typically do. My ultimate thing is to go through it at least every year. And because every time I do read it, I get something else, a completely different insight on it. Okay, so it looks like the largest percentage have plans to read it. I think after today's webcast, you might find it to be very easy to get into the book. And we've got some people who have read it years ago. That's great. Thank you. And some of you have read some of it. Okay. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about the book and Dr. Covey. Many people are surprised to learn that when the book was published, Stephen Covey was 57 years old. The book represented decades of study and research that he did on the topic of individual effectiveness. Now, the actual origin of the book started in the middle 70s when Stephen Covey was enrolled in a doctoral program. At that time, he was studying and reviewing success success literature. He was going through 200 years of books and articles about what made people successful. But very soon, his focus moved away from studying what made people successful because he became interested in what made them effective. And his research led him to realize that a pattern actually appeared in the lives of all of the effective people he was studying. And he called that pattern the 3 constants. And I'd like to share them with you now. The first constant is change. Change has always been part of the human experience, and it will always be part of the human experience. Now that takes us to the second constant, which is choice. As humans, you and I have the ability to exercise choice in the midst of any change or situation. And the third constant is the principles of effectiveness. Stephen Covey realized that no matter what era he studied, no matter what changes were occurring in the world at that time or even in the lives of the people he studied, the principles that made people effective always remained the same. So his aha moment happened when he suddenly realized that when people incorporated principles of effectiveness into their character, they led lives that were filled with satisfaction, meaning, and they were truly effective. And so those principles of effectiveness that Dr. Covey highlighted are embedded in the 7 habits of highly effective people. Now, I've been using the word effective several times, and it's important to understand what the word effectiveness means in the 7 habits. So here's our working definition. The essence of effectiveness is that you get the results you want today in such a way that you can get even better results in the future. Now, to help clarify this definition, Stephen Covey often used the fable of the goose and the golden egg. And if you've never heard the fable or if you've forgotten it, I'm going to give you a real quick summary. One day, a very, very poor farmer discovered in the nest of his goose a glittering golden egg. And the next day, he finds another one. He can't believe how lucky he is. Day after day, he rushes out to the nest and he finds a golden egg every day. And the farmer became fabulously wealthy. But as his wealth grew, so did his impatience. The farmer didn't want to wait for 1 egg a day. He wanted them all at once. He believed that all the eggs were just laying inside the goose, and so he decided to kill the goose. But when he opened up the goose, he found nothing. No golden eggs, and there was no way to get any more because he had destroyed the goose that produced the golden eggs. It's a sad story, isn't it? Well, the farmer really thought that effectiveness was about production. He felt that the more golden eggs he had, the more effective he was. And that's not an uncommon way of thinking even today. I mean, I'm sure you know people who think the more I do, the more I produce, the more effective I am. But the fable teaches us that if our goal is to increase production and we end up killing that which produces the results, we have actually confused effectiveness with efficiency. For Stephen Covey, the fable actually teaches us that effectiveness is about 2 things. The first thing is about production, but it's also about taking care of the resource that produces the results. People are truly effective when they understand that to keep producing better and better results, they must take care of that which produces those results. And in today's fast-paced world where the drive is to do more and get more, this is a really important principle for us to remember. So what I'd like to do is take you into the first video that you would see in the program. It's called The 7 Habits Promise. And in this video, Stephen Covey is going to explain why the 7 habits are as relevant today as they were all the way back in 1989. And in the video, you're going to see phrases that depict the challenges that people are facing in today's world that the 7 Habits will help resolve. As you watch the video, I'm going to ask you to think about this question. In what area of your life would you like to be more effective? And after the video ends, we'll put up a chat for you to respond to that.
Habits are powerful forces in our lives. They determine our level of effectiveness or ineffectiveness. The purpose of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is to help you lead your life in a truly effective way. They represent a proven process of personal and interpersonal growth that can have both immediate and lasting impact. I'm asked fairly often, are the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People as relevant today as when you first wrote about them? My answer: the greater the change, the more difficult the challenges, the more relevant the habits become. Why? Because they are based on principles of effectiveness that endure. As you learn about the 7 habits, I invite you to apply them to the specific challenges and opportunities you are facing. Watch what happens. Your effectiveness will grow. Your influence will expand. Your relationships will improve.
All right, folks. Over in the chat box, I'll ask you, if you would, to share your thoughts. In what area of your life would you like to be more effective? Anything come to mind while you were watching the video?
Well, I can certainly share as we're waiting for people to share their thoughts. And I will say, and it sounds kind of funny, but I would like to have more fun in life. I think I might have also had a confusion around the whole effectiveness and efficiency, and I find that unless I'm doing something that produces a tangible result, unless I'm being productive, I see, fun as kind of a waste of time, and I'm realizing that I may have some regrets looking back. So I'm looking to have more fun, not have everything be so structured and planned, and introduce a little spontaneity into my life. So that's kind of what I'm focused on, the year of saying yes to fun. I don't know about you.
I like the energy as you're saying that. It was funny, Tanya, as soon as you said more fun, a chat flew by where someone said exactly the same thing. And here's another one, expanding my friends' network and having more fun. I'm also seeing a lot of work-life balance. I'm seeing things about financial management, being more organized. I, too, am committing this year to do a much better job at building back what we're going to talk later about, which is sharpening my saw, making sure that it's not all work, and that I make sure I am starting to spend time doing other pursuits as well. Well, folks, I want to thank you for your chats. We looked just now at the origins and the 7 habits and what it means to be effective. So now what I'd like to do is take you into 2 models that we put out right at the beginning of the program in our opening module, which we call Foundations. The 2 models are the Maturity Continuum and the See to Get cycle, but we're going to start with the Maturity Continuum. Now, speaking personally, I think Stephen Covey's genius was his ability to synthesize decades of research and thinking he did about personal and interpersonal effectiveness, and he put them into 7 habits. I find that amazing. And then he sequenced those 7 habits into a roadmap, pictured here, that's called the Maturity Continuum. Now, the power of the 7 habits is actually in the sequencing of them and in the relationship that exists between them. Taken all together, the 7 habits enable us to grow and develop as individuals and become truly effective. Now, to help you understand what the 7 habits are and the power that they hold, we're going to look at a video that we show in class called the Maturity Continuum. And the purpose of the video is to give you an orientation to what the habits are, but also to the relationship. This time, as you watch the video, I'm going to ask you to think about 2 questions which we will have as a poll after the video. The first question is, which habit is your greatest strength? And the second is, which habit would you most like to improve? Tanya, I'll be fascinated to hear what you have to say about this, given that you have fun on your agenda. Okay, and I think listening will be really important because it's clearly explained. Okay? All right, so let's put on that second video, Jess, if you don't mind. It's called the Maturity Continuum.
To achieve lasting effectiveness, we go through a natural process of development symbolized by the Maturity Continuum. Dependence is the lowest level of maturity. When we are dependent, we need others to take care of us, to come through for us, to give us our sense of worth and security. Dependence is the attitude of you. I need you to take care of me. The first 3 habits help us move from dependence to independence, which is a higher level of maturity. Habit 1, be proactive, means that we develop our own power to choose our actions and accept responsibility for our choices. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind, means that we define the kind of life we want to lead. It's creating clear objectives and laying out a vision or blueprint for what matters most to us and who we want to be. Habit 3, put first things first, is where we plan and accomplish our goals so that our lives reflect the vision we have for ourselves. Learning and regularly practicing these first 3 habits helps us to win the victory over self, attaining what we call the private victory. Where dependence is the attitude of you are responsible for me. Independence is the attitude of I am responsible for myself. I can choose my future and make it happen. To be highly effective, there is another level of maturity, interdependence, which is the attitude of we. It's where we work together creatively with others to achieve far more than any one of us could accomplish on our own. Achieving interdependence is the goal of habits 4 through 6. Habit 4, think win-win, is the attitude of seeking mutual benefit in our relationships and interactions with others. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood, is the ability to truly listen to others, to understand and honor their perspectives and realities. It also means to communicate our own views in a way that is both open and respectful. Habit 6, synergize, is the process of working with others in a collaborative and creative way to achieve new and better results. When we think and act interdependently, we win what is called the public victory. Without sufficient independence, people will not have the character and self-mastery to work interdependently with others. That is why habits 1, 2, and 3 come before habits 4, 5, and 6. They focus on self-mastery, on developing the strength of our own character. Private victories precede public victories. Habit 7, sharpen the saw, surrounds all the other habits and is the habit of renewal. It's the habit that gives us the power to consistently carry out the other habits in our lives. It's a pattern of daily private victories that creates an upward spiral of increasing effectiveness that lifts us to new and more rewarding levels of understanding and living.
All right. So we're going to be putting up a poll, and in the poll that we'll put up, I'm going to ask you to answer two questions. One is, which habit is your greatest strength? And also, what habit would you most like to improve? And the two polls are right below each other. So the first poll you'll see is the one for greatest strength, and if you scroll down, you'll see the second poll right below that. Don't forget to click your submit button. Tanya, what did you get from that video? Which habit would you either like to improve, or what do you think is your strength? I'm going to let you pick.
I'm not allowed to say all of the above, correct? No. I think I'll start with, okay, so I'll do it in order then. My greatest strength, I think really it would be option E, seek first to understand and then to be understood. I think as a learning professional, I've got a lot of awareness around what it takes to listen and to hear people, so I practice that a lot. And so I think I'm a pretty good listener, and I think I'm naturally empathic. So that's probably, of the options, that's probably one of my greater strengths. And it's funny, my default was to want to go to the area of improving before answering the strengths question, so I guess that says something about me. But as it relates to areas to improve, probably C, put first things first. I do like to have the end in mind and have a plan, and then I get distracted. So I think it's the discipline of staying focused on what's most important and not taking my eye off the ball because of what's urgent. And
okay.
Yeah, so perhaps Jessica can close the poll and we can see how similar or dissimilar I am to the rest of the audience.
I'd love to see that. So we're going to look first at the poll results for what was our greatest strength, and we'll see what that comes up.
And I will say
it's funny.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Tanya. No, I was just going to say that every time I see this video, my strength changes, and the one that I need to improve changes. So I'm never consistent. It depends on what's been going on in my life at that time. So it's a floating target for me.
Well, and also I would imagine that as we grow and develop and push ourselves and take on bigger challenges, there may be different things that come to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
So, and here we see the results. So it would appear that, let's see, how similar am I? So the greatest strength, 25% of folks selected option E, seek to first understand and then be understood. And
and then on the improve.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Let's see. Oh, wow, we have a nice variety of answers about this. Nothing is like jumping out in terms of like a huge number one, but we've got a lot around habit 5, seek first, understand, put first things first, be proactive. They're the ones that typically come up. But we're also getting a nice percentage around sharpening of the saw. For those of you who voted for sharpening of your saw, here's some good news. Your decision just to participate in this webcast is actually going to count as a saw sharpening experience, so good for you. The maturity continuum plays a strong role in the program, but what we also do at the opening of the program is contrast the maturity continuum, the roadmap, with what happens when we're not practicing those 7 habits. And so I'm going to introduce you to what we call the immaturity continuum. And oftentimes when we're stressed or when we are under huge change, we might revert to bad habits. We at Franklin Covey call those the anti-habits, and they can be huge obstacles to our growth and our effectiveness. So I'm going to do a real quick walkthrough of the anti-habits of the immaturity continuum. And as I do, just ask yourself a question: have I ever visited or participated in any of these anti-habits? I'm going to start with the first 3. The very first one is anti-habit number 1, be the victim. Here, I blame all of my problems on other people. My parents, my spouse, my kids, my boss, or I blame it on circumstances or things like my job or the economy or the news on TV. In anti-habit number 1, I'm never the problem. You or somebody else or something else is always the problem. Anti-habit number 2 is begin with nothing in mind. When I'm in this anti-habit, I don't have any goals, I don't have a plan, I never think about tomorrow, I only live for today. I don't even think about what I truly want to achieve, who I want to be, or even what will satisfy me. I drift and I'm aimless. And that leads us right into anti-habit number 3, which is put urgent things first. Because you don't know what's important, that was anti-habit number 2, you start doing urgent things first. You postpone focusing on important things unless they are urgent. You give into distractions. I sometimes gravitate to any crisis because it feeds that urgency. And those first 3 anti-habits create what we call the private failure. Because here, I'm not in control of myself. I let outside things direct me. I don't grow. I don't mature. I don't change my life. And that keeps me from being able to have great relationships with others. So let's take a look at the next 3 anti-habits. Anti-habit number 4 is think, win, lose. Here I see life as a competitive place. I always want to win. I don't want to lose. I don't want you to succeed because that would make me lose. So what do? I focus on getting what I want when I want it, which is all the time. And that takes me to anti-habit number 5, seek first to be understood, then be understood again and again and again. Because I want my own way, I will just talk at you, thinking I'll wear you down eventually, and you'll give me what I want. In meetings, I make sure that I express my perspective first, and then I pretend to listen to the rest of you. But what you have to say isn't truly important because my way is the right way. And that leads me to anti-habit number 6, which is called minimize. Since I believe my way is the right way, I want to do things myself because I don't trust you to do it. If somebody has an idea that threatens me, I will actually put down their idea. I'll minimize it. I might even talk against the idea. Sometimes I might even take credit for somebody else's idea. Those 3 habits take me to the public failure because nobody wants to work with me. They don't want to trust. They don't trust me. And if this is in my private life is filled with conflict and dissatisfaction. And now there is one more anti-habit, and it's the one that I get most concerned about. It's called burnout. I see this more and more. As people try to keep pace with the demands of the 24/7 world, when they keep focused on getting things done, they get burnt out. And when you're burnt out, you become too tired to plan. You don't have the desire or the patience to listen well or to be empathic like Tanya is. Bit by bit, because I'm burnt out, I'm killing the goose. So the big question is, do we see ourselves in any of these anti-habits? And I know that I do on my very, very bad days. The contrast between the maturity continuum and the immaturity continuum actually shows 2 things. The first is that you and I have a choice about the path that we want to travel. And the second thing is that it shows us the long-term results that come from that choice. If we choose to follow the 7 habits, it means that we choose effectiveness over ineffectiveness. But it also means that we have to change some of our anti-habits. And it's never easy to change a habit. But it becomes easier if we have a process. And the see-do-get cycle is that process. Now, it looks pretty simple, just a simple circle, but it's one of the most powerful concepts that we use in the entire program. It explains how habits are created and what we need to do to change a habit. Now, in order to use the cycle, I'm going to introduce you to a word called paradigms. A paradigm is the way that you see and understand the world around you. Think of it as your mental map. Now, the paradigm is really important because it's going to drive the cycle. And here's how it works. The way you see the world, your paradigm, will drive what you do. Now think about your habits, your behaviors, your practices, so your actions. How I see the world drives what I do, and what I do generates results. I'm going to give you a real quick example of this see-you-do-get cycle. Let's say that some of you, and I'll pretend I have this one, I have this paradigm, I'm too busy today to take time for myself. So just for a second, think about if that was your working paradigm, what would you do or not do day after day? What I might start doing is cutting back on exercise in order to put more time toward other things. Maybe I cut back on sleep. Maybe I'm too busy to spend time with family and friends. Maybe I cut out time for self-development or community service or relaxation or fun, as Tanya mentioned. Now, if that becomes a habit pattern, cutting all those things out, what are the results that I'm going to get? Burnout, like we just saw in anti-habit number 7, but also health issues, increased stress, a feeling of isolation, poor relationships, I don't grow as a professional. It goes on and on. And the challenge is that because I chose this pattern, I chose this mindset, I have actually chosen ineffectiveness. But let's say you want to change your habit. Well, you don't just change your behavior, you first have to change the paradigm because the paradigm drives the behavior. So I want everybody to imagine that you've now taken on this new paradigm. I take time for myself every day so I have the ability to do important things. Now, let's just imagine that every day you start taking 20 minutes out of the entire 24 hours to do something for yourself. What might those behaviors look like? What might you do? 20 minutes every day. The list was too long for me to put on the slide, so I summarized it in this way. I would take 20 minutes every day and invest in the 4 dimensions of myself. All of us have 4 dimensions, your physical self, your mental self, your social and emotional, and your spiritual self. So what does that really mean? Well, maybe one day I go to lunch. Maybe one day I take a walk at lunch with a friend. Maybe one day I read a blog that I've been meaning to read. Maybe one day I call a friend. Maybe one day I do some volunteer work, or at the very least, maybe I meditate or listen to music or spend time in nature. If those behaviors became a habit for you, guess what results you're going to get in the long term? You're going to get a big, fat, happy goose. That's what we're going to get. Because you are taking care of the resource that generates those results. And that paradigm takes us to effectiveness. Paradigms are so important because they govern what we do and the results that we get. And here's what Dr. Covey says about paradigms. If you want to make minor changes in your life, then work on your behavior. But if you want to make significant quantum breakthroughs, then you've got to work on your paradigms. Now, folks, you've been introduced to the 2 key models that we use throughout all of the habits. And now what I'd like to do is take you into one of the habits that you would actually see in the program. And the habit that I've decided to give is the habit called Habit 1, Be Proactive. It's actually the keystone to all the others. If we don't get this habit down, we will never be able to do the other 6 habits. For every habit, we open up with which principles of effectiveness are associated with that habit. And here are the principles for Habit 1. Responsibility, choice, accountability, initiative, and resourcefulness. Sometimes I have a fantasy of what if most people just followed these principles? Imagine what it would be like in the world. Once we look at the principles, then what we do is compare a commonly held mindset to the one that is more effective. Okay, so here we go. The commonly held paradigm is this. You are responsible for my happiness, my failures, my frustrations, anything that goes wrong for me, it's your fault. Now, if I accept this paradigm as my working paradigm, I am never going to be anything but a victim. And I am a victim of whatever happens to me. See, when the stimulus comes in, it's going to cause me to respond, and I will get reactive to that stimulus. If the stimulus that comes at me is negative, then I'm going to have a negative instantaneous response. If it's a positive, then I'll have a positive emotional response. But since my paradigm is that I'm not responsible for anything, then what happens is I become highly reactive to whatever the stimulus is. And when I let circumstances start to control me, the results are that I take no responsibility for my life. I always see myself as a victim, and I'm always going to find someone or something to blame for my lack of progress, my lack of happiness, or my results. Okay. Now, just like before, we can have a different paradigm. So what happens in the 7 Habits now is that we will contrast the paradigm we just looked at with a highly effective one for Habit 1. And it's this. I am responsible for my happiness, my failures. And if I'm frustrated, there's something that I can do about it. When we have that paradigm of I am responsible, I understand that I'm responsible for my choices and my decisions. So no matter what the stimulus is that comes at me, a proactive person actually pauses and puts a space between the stimulus and the response that they want to give. And in that space, each of us can choose what response will get us to our desired results and that reflect our principles. And so when we use that pause, and when I can choose the response, and I don't give it based on the circumstance, I become, in the long term, a proactive person. I start to see that I have options. I am resourceful. I can take initiative and solve the things that are coming at me, and I'm always aware of what my desired results are. So this is just the first behavior. Pause before you respond is the most important behavior because it sets up all the other ones. After we do this, you'll learn how to use proactive language, both mentally and verbally. You're going to learn how to stop thinking reactively and how to eliminate reactive language from what we say to others. Instead, we're going to learn how to adapt proactive language and how that proactive language actually governs many times how we feel and see things in the world. We have some great videos around proactive language. The next behavior that we look at in Habit 1 is called focus on your circle of influence. Taking what we've learned about putting that space and having choice and using proactive language, now we, instead of complaining about things, our circle of concern, we learn how to spend most of our time and energy in the circle of influence, where I can say things like, well, what options do I have? What haven't I tried? What would a highly effective person do? And when we start expanding our circle of influence and we stay out of that circle of concern, we get to become the fourth behavior, which is to be a transition person. A transition person is someone who adopts all of the behaviors we just talked about, breaks away from the negative pattern, and instead starts to demonstrate proactivity on such a consistent level that they pass it around to other people. The work that you and I do in Habit 1 is that gigantic step from being dependent, and it's the step that takes us toward interdependence. Now, in Habit 1, we see one of our award-winning program videos that actually causes a shift for many participants. Carry Your Own Weather will challenge each of us to be proactive, to create that space between stimulus and response, to focus on what we can do, not on what we can't, and move from being a victim to taking control over our lives. So I'm going to put on this video now, and as you watch it, I'd just like you to think about how can you begin to carry your own weather.
Monday morning, and it's raining. A gray, melancholy day. On a day like this, maybe we can be excused for feeling gray and melancholy ourselves. We get into a mood, and the whole day seems to go badly. Don't you feel better when the weather outside is great? But what if you could carry your own weather within you? What about the social world we live in? Don't you feel better when you're treated better? That's being reactive to what we could call the social weather, the social culture. When you carry your weather with you, you can choose to be consistent regardless of how people treat you. That's what it means to be proactive. Being reactive is the opposite of being proactive, not taking responsibility for our own life. You always see yourself as a victim of the weather, of your moods, of someone who has it in for you. Habit 1 is based on the principle that your life is the result of your own decisions, not your conditions, not what's happening around you. That's why Habit 1 is so foundational, so basic. Unless you practice Habit 1, you can never practice the other habits of highly effective people. Years ago, I was doing research in a library in Hawaii. While thumbing through a book, I came across an idea that changed my whole outlook. The author said something like this: between what happens to us, that is the stimulus, and our response is a space. In that space lies our power and our freedom to choose our response. And in those choices lie our growth and our happiness. This insight sunk deep into my heart. Even in the midst of challenging circumstances, we have this exhilarating power to choose how we will respond. For instance, the great Viktor Frankl, the Jewish Austrian psychiatrist imprisoned in the death camps of Nazi Germany during World War II, experienced unbelievable indignities and tortures. He was raised to believe that you are basically a product of your childhood. But while he was in the death camp, he began to observe some very interesting things. Different people reacted differently to the same circumstances. He himself experienced terrible things. Some of his own loved ones were killed. One day they stripped him, put him under lights, and performed experiments upon his body. At that lowest possible point, he discovered what he called the last human freedom, the power to choose your own response to any condition, to anything that happens to you. During his darkest moments, Frankl would visualize himself lecturing to his students in Austria following his release. He pictured himself teaching them about the very experiences he was having then. He came to believe that the most basic human capability of all is that between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose. Frankl later determined the thing that enabled survival in the death camps was not necessarily intelligence or survival skills, but a sense of purpose, a contribution yet to be made. This became the basis for his brilliant autobiography, Man's Search for Meaning. It's not what people do to us that hurts us. It's our chosen response to what they do that hurts us. As Gandhi put it, they cannot take away our self-respect if we do not give it to them. We must simply never build our emotional life around the weaknesses of other people. Otherwise, we give them permission to continue to mess up our lives. We give our future away. Several years ago, I was making a presentation on this subject of proactivity, and a woman stood up in the middle of my speech and started to give a speech on her own, spontaneously. She was filled with explosive learning and excitement. You could see in her eyes, her gestures, her body language. And then she sensed the inappropriateness of what she was doing. She sat back down. I could hardly wait until the break to talk to her. "What happened to you?" I asked. She shared her story. She said, "I'm the full-time nurse to an extremely miserable man. He doesn't even acknowledge me, let alone show me any form of appreciation." She went on to explain that this elderly man, entrusted to her care, was absolutely miserable and took his misery out on her. She was becoming more and more depressed and hated the thought of going to work each day and facing this irritable man. All of the other nurses felt the same way. They talked even of his demise, wished for it, hoped for it, while they were taking care of him. Then she said something to me. "For you to stand up there and suggest that I am choosing to be miserable was almost too much. But then, listening to you, I suddenly realized that I do choose to be miserable. Before, I believed I didn't choose it. He made me. But then I realized how dependent I am. I'd given my power over myself to him and his miserable behavior." "As I thought about what you were saying," she said, "I realized I had the power to choose and felt like I had been let out of prison. That's why I stood up. I could not contain myself. I just can't tell you what that means. This feeling of freedom is almost overwhelming. We have the power and the freedom to choose, to create our own weather each day. As Fulton J. Sheen once said, each of us makes his own weather, determines the color of the skies in the emotional universe which he inhabits."
In the workshop, it is very, very quiet after this video plays, and I don't want to tamper with the feeling that you're having right now. I do hope, however, that the message from just this one video is one that you'll carry with you for a long time. Our purpose today in the webcast was to introduce you to the 7 Habits Signature Program that's offered by my friends here at the Canadian Management Center. But what you didn't experience was the actual classroom experience, the interactive exercises, the group activities, the one-on-one conversations, the feeling of empowerment and excitement that comes from knowing that, hey, I'm getting a roadmap for my future, and I have the ability to make choices now that will give me greater effectiveness. I really hope that you have a chance to experience the 7 Habits classroom yourself, and that hopefully you'll agree with a participant who wrote to us recently that the class was, quote, unparalleled regarding its practical application to both business and personal life. It was one of the best seminars, if not the best, I have ever attended. We love comments like that. So, Tanya, I'm going to turn it back over to you because I think you've got some important information for the folks on the call.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eileen. And I'm glad that last video worked better for folks. At this point, really what I want to do is simply invite all of you who are interested in learning more about how you can get access to the 7 Habits course, or maybe the 2 other Franklin Covey programs that we offer. We do offer a 7 Habits for Managers, as well as the 5 Choices to Extraordinary Productivity. So please visit our website at cmcoutperform.com. You'll see a link there right on the homepage to Franklin Covey. You can get all the information that you need regarding these two programs. I also just want to take a moment to thank you, Eileen, for the insights you were able to provide for us and give us a real taste of what's in store for those of us who want to continue on the 7 Habits journey so that we can more fully live it and so that this doesn't become just a theoretical exercise. And thank you to all of our participants today. We appreciate your questions and your comments. There was a question on the line as to the author referenced in that last movie, the author of the book, and that author is Viktor Frankl. So it's an awesome Man's Search for Meaning, awesome book. You want to check that out as well. So thank all of you, and we look forward to having you participate in a future CMC learning event. Have a great rest of afternoon.